What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. If you want to support the channel, you can use that whatnot link in the description down below. You'll get a free $15 to spend on magic cards when you sign up, and you'll be supporting the channel when you do it. Additionally, you can follow me on Patreon. You'll get to vote on the weekly voted patron Deck Tech. Additionally, you can just like, comment, and subscribe. Special shout out to my high contributing patrons, Newsom, you rock. Now, let's get into today's deck tech with the Gitrog monster. And guys, this guy is not okay. He's only 5 mana. They gave him trample and haste, and then he's got a broken combat trigger. Honestly, this card did not need haste, and the fact that it has haste just makes this deck super fast. Now, he's got a saddle ability, but what that is, it's basically just like a crew ability for creatures now. So we're going to saddle him up with something like a Phyrexian Soulgorger, deal combat damage, draw 8 cards, and throw up to 8 lands onto the battlefield. So that is going to catapult us way ahead of our opponents, and we're just going to be playing with a lot more resources than they have. Now, some of the best cards in this deck are something like a Skullspore Nexus. Not only will this double the Phyrexian Soulgorger's power, but additionally, it's going to make it to where whenever that Phyrexian Soulgorger dies, we just replace it with another token that we can sacrifice next turn. And there is no shortage of low CMC creatures that have massive powers. Yes, some of them have downsides, but we're just going to be sacrificing them the turn we cast them anyway, so it's not going to be an issue. Another card that really surprised me in playtesting was Psychosis Crawler. It's not uncommon for us to make 40 plus power creatures and then draw up to 40 plus cards a turn. So this guy just sitting on the battlefield means that we could potentially kill our opponents out of nowhere. Another thing we really want to do in this deck is have those lands enter the battlefield untapped. That's potentially the only balanced part of this card. So when we add stuff like Vigor and Spelunking, those lands will enter in untapped, and we can get a pseudo extra turn after our combat step. That's going to really set us up to kill our opponents even faster. Last but not least, guys, get those calculators ready because this is a Scute Swarm deck. The fact that we can slam this guy on the battlefield and then slam him up to 8 lands on the battlefield will just end the game and take any hope our opponents had of winning the game right out of them. I did go ahead and shove the Meat Hook Massacre in the deck as well, just because math is hard. Don't really like math, so we can just slam Scute Swarm, slam our 8 lands, then slam the Meat Hook Massacre, and then say good game. If that sounds like a deck tech you want to get into, guys, let's get into it. Let's kick it off by talking about those expendable creatures we want to sacrifice. Lupin Prototype, Rotting Regisaur, and Relic Golem are super solid, all high power, all very low CMC. Phyrexian Soulgorger, Shakedown Heavy, and Pugnacious Hammerskull also hit the nail on the head whenever it comes to high power creatures with low CMC. Demigoth Titan, Grothama All Devouring, and Ghalta Primal Hunger, a little more expensive except for Ghalta. We're probably only ever paying 2 green for this guy, but again, the power's just even higher. Also, Grothama All Devouring in a pinch can draw us a ton of cards. Yargle and Multani, again, we are getting higher into the CMC, but with higher CMC becomes higher power. This guy is insane in the deck. Drawing 18 cards and being able to throw up to 18 lands into play is massive, especially when we have the Skullspore Nexus. This guy is just a 36/36. Druid class can provide a lot of value. I'm looking at the level 3 class though. When it comes to something to sacrifice, it's pretty easy to get us there, and in the late game, whenever we've run out of creatures, this card can really come in handy. Vaultborn Tyrant. Now this is a new card, but I'm excited to try it out in this deck. He will trigger a ton off of all of our cards because they all have super high power and they're all very low CMC. So you can kind of storm off by casting massive creatures with this guy on the battlefield. Kind of insane. Notably, he's easy to sacrifice because he replaces himself. Bane of Progress, we can hose over the artifact and enchantment players while getting a massive creature to sacrifice for our commander. Altar of the Wretched is one of the best cards in this deck. Not only can it draw us a ton of cards, but additionally we can flip it over and turn it into a massive creature. All of the cards that we've previously sacrificed or discarded are now going to get crafted into one giant creature. This is again one of those cards that can easily hit that 40 power threshold. The Skullspore Nexus, probably one of the best cards in the deck. The fact that we can sacrifice something like a Phyrexian Soulgorger after we doubled its power, we're going to get an instant 16 cards and get to throw up to 16 land cards into play. After that, we'll be left with a 16 power token that we can double the power of next turn, getting us the ability to draw 32 cards and put up to 32 lands into play. Let's talk about how we can abuse these lands entering the battlefield and our high power creatures overall. Greensleeves, Rampaging Ballast, and Avenger of Zendikar are just cards that generate instant board states out of nowhere. Again, when we can throw 8 lands into play, not only do we get an instant board state off of these other 2, but think about Avenger of Zendikar. All of those plant tokens just became 8/9s. Nissa is just amazing reanimation in the deck. The fact that she cares about CMC and not power is massive, since a lot of our creatures are low CMC but high power. Omnixilus is an amazing card in the deck. This guy gets massive very quickly, and not to mention, you can just drain out your opponents with him. We're throwing a lot of lands on the battlefield, and 3 damage really stacks up quickly. Scute Swarm, we already know this is one of the best game enders in this deck, especially when you pair it with the Meat Hook Massacre. Math is hard, so this just gets rid of it. Zapendrel and Unnatural Growth are also super solid cards in the deck, and they're not hard to cast at all, since this is only a 2-color deck for Unnatural Growth, and then Zapendrel does cost a lot, but remember, we are throwing a lot of additional lands onto the battlefield with our commander. This deck does not struggle to make 40 plus power creatures, so adding something like a Gerard Golgari Lichlord to go ahead and end out the game is definitely doable. The last thing you want to do is generate an unstoppable board state and then pass the turn. Psychosis Crawler, another game ender in the deck that really puts in work. I mean, even just having something like an Avenger of Zendikar on the battlefield, Psychosis Crawler, and a Greater Good usually means you're walking away with the win. Selvala Heart of the Wilds, seeing this early game, you are definitely happy. The fact that we can play something like a Lupin prototype into Selvala Heart of the Wilds and have 5 mana active to us next turn is why this deck is so scary. Cultivator Colossus seems like a very solid card late game. Now, the way you want to use this in the deck kind of seems like a head scratcher, but really makes sense once you start thinking about it. You want to attack with your commander, draw all the cards, but not put the lands into play. And then you slam Cultivator Colossus on the battlefield. Now you're generating even more landfall triggers, and you have a ton of lands in your hand to start drawing your entire deck. You could also just cast him and start beating face, because he's really good at that as well. Gwynna, Eyes of Gaia is one of the best cards in the deck you want to see early game, because the storm aspect of this deck is actually pretty real. The fact that we have a lot of 3 CMC to 2 CMC creatures with high power means that we're going to be casting them and untapping Gwynna. She can get massive in this deck and really generate a ton of mana for us. Greater Good and Life's Legacy, if our commander gets removed, having these as a backup plan is going to be super solid. Ruthless Technomancer can generate an insane amount of mana in this deck. I mean, just sacrificing a 40 power creature to generate 40 mana is very broken, especially when we have a Skullspore Nexus on the battlefield, and we're probably just going to have the ability to replace that creature right away anyway. The Great Hinge kind of does everything we want in the deck. It makes our creatures a little bit bigger, it gives us some mana, and it's only ever 2 mana in this deck. Spelunking, Amulet of Vigor, and Tireless Provisioner all kind of do the same thing in the deck. It's just going to make it to where our lands essentially enter untapped. Kamal's Will is pretty flexible here. Not only can it be a game ender because we throw a lot of lands onto the battlefield, additionally it's solid removal. Let's move on to some of the more supporting cards in the deck. We have Guardian Augmenter, we have Sereth the Viper's Fang, and Asceticism. Now, our commander is kind of kill on sight because, oh my gosh, it's terrifying. The fact that it has haste and trample does really mitigate a lot of the dies to removal argument, because you do get instant value due to the haste. But again, there's nothing wrong with sealing the deal and running a couple lightning bolts in your deck. That way there is an obstacle they have to get rid of before they can even think about touching your commander. Plaza of Heroes and Heroic Intervention are also going to see play in this deck for the same reason. Kamal is just in the deck as a backup plan. Ideally, we're killing someone with Gerard or the Meat Hook Massacre with the Scute Swarm combo, or even Avenger of Zendikar, but in case that doesn't work, going to Beats is the next best option. Eternal Witness and Balaged Recovery, along with Tekanuma, can return our key pieces back from the graveyard. Elemental Bond just for some solid card advantage. Return of the Wild Speaker, again very flexible here. It can buff our creatures, or we can just draw a ton of cards. We kept the ramp super simple. There's over 7 1-mana ramp cards in this deck. Again, this deck really does want to go fast. And then after that, we are playing your 3 Visits, Farseek, and Nature's Lore effects. As for our interactions, we're playing Nature's Claim, Assassin's Trophy, and Song of the Dryads to get rid of our permanents. Cityscape Leveler, also super solid here, really easy to cast and does synergize with our commander wanting those high power creatures. Fade from History is a solid board wipe that gets rid of any of those artifact and enchantment permanent strategies. Beast Within, again, permanent removal. Then we have Azuri's Predation. Just in case there's any token strategy that's trying to outdo us, we can just shut that down and create an instant board state while we're doing it. Mandate of Abaddon, also very solid in this deck since our commander does have a lot of power to him, and it does 9 times out of 10 act as a one-sided board wipe. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I really do appreciate it. With that being said, I would like to thank you guys for watching, and I would like to thank my patrons. Newsome, Excessum, Chicken Salad, and Predator, you guys are amazing. You really keep the channel going, and I couldn't appreciate it enough. With that being said, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.